Hey everyone. So today I'm going to be covering how to set up a simple contact listener. Now the contact listener is useful because when objects collide in a Box2D world, while that's nice and everything that you have collision response and collision resolving and everything done for you, however, it's also nice to be able to have something happen when they collide. Um, and this is kind of how you're going to be able to check and create interactions between bodies when they collide with each other and when they stop colliding with each other as well. Um, we're only going to be using two of the methods provided by the contact listener interface, as the other two are a little bit more complex and more advanced for what we're trying to achieve in this video. So let's get started by creating our first contact listener. We're just going to call this my contact listener for the time being. I don't necessarily like that naming convention, but for the sake of a tutorial, it might just be easiest to understand and follow. So with that, you're going to want to implement the contact listener interface, and you'll notice you'll get some errors there, and that's because there are some methods that it comes with. Like I mentioned, there are four methods here, and the two we're going to be using today are begin contact and end contact. Pre-solve and post-solve are used for actual resolution of the collision and overlapping and whatnot. So you might not want to mess with those too much because it does use like the manifold and everything. And the contact impulse is essentially the impulse that the bodies will experience and whatnot. So just forget those for right now. We'll probably come back to it in a later video. I'm not sure. I don't necessarily use them too often myself. But yeah, begin contact and end contact are pretty much what you'd expect them to be. When two bodies collide, when their fixtures collide actually, then you can check what kind of fixtures they are, where they came from, and then you can also do the same by seeing when that collision has ended and be able to do something after that. So there's a lot of neat things you can do here. So we got our basic interface set up. So let's jump back over to our tutorial state. You'll notice I have just a regular game state again, just some pretty simple stuff like I've been using in my other videos, Box2D World, debug render, and whatnot. But I'm going to create a new entity just for the sake of this video, and I'm going to call it tutorial box. And what this is essentially going to be is it's going to be a wrapper for a Box2D body, and there's a reason I'm doing this specifically in a separate class, and you'll kind of see that in a little bit once we start filling out our contact listener a bit more. So let's get that public constructor set up. So tutorial box. We'll want to pass it a reference to our world, and we'll also want to provide it an ID, which I'll also explain. So you know what, I'm going to make this public because just for ease of access when I want to do some controls and stuff. And then public string ID, this ID equals ID, and import that world and whatnot. Public, no, that's actually supposed to be private. Create box body. We're going to want to pass it or forward it that world object. That should be good enough there. That should be void. Okay, so let's see, that should be create box body, pass it the world. Sorry about this. This is going to be a little bit of boilerplate stuff as usual. And I'm sure if you've watched my other videos, you're probably wondering, why don't you just use your pre-made bodybuilder methods? Well, that's because there's some things I want to show you here that are a little bit specific to what we're trying to achieve. So with that, I'm also not just, let's see where to start. So I'm gonna just get the body definition set up. Bdef equals new body definition. Import that, and then bdef dot fixed rotation, that'll be true. Bdef dot type equals, we'll make that a dynamic body. And then bdef dot position dot set. We'll just make them all, you know what, I should probably pass it in x and y. Float x, float y. So x, y, x divided by 32, because that's my ppm constant. I'm not going to, yeah, maybe I should. Yeah. So ppm constants, okay, and that. Okay, got our body definition set up, and then we're going to want a polygon shape. Shape equals new polygon shape. Import that shape dot set as box. That's going to be 32 divided by constants dot ppm divided by 2 as usual. Okay. And now I'm going to begin creating a fixture definition. And if you haven't seen me use these before, maybe check out some of the other videos, such as when I created a contact filters. That's a really good video just in general for understanding how to choose which objects can actually collide with each other. It's a pretty big topic with Box2D, and it's definitely a good one to have in your skill set. So new fixture def, import that, and then fixture def dot shape equals shape, fixture def dot density equals 1.0f. And then I'm going to do this body equals world dot create body def. And here's something that, oh, I'm sorry, that was actually bdef. Here's the part that is actually something you need to pay attention to and look at. So this body dot create fixture fixture def, and after I create that fixture, I'm going to call a method called set user data, and I'm going to set it to this. Now, to explain this and break this down, this is pretty important. So you'll see I create the body's fixture as a shape of, it's a box, and I set that fixture's user data to this, which is the entirety of this object. So I'm setting this box fixture to consider itself a tutorial box object, or that's essentially what it's referencing. So it'll have a reference to this object. Anytime I find this fixture in my world and I ask for data about this fixture's user data, it'll give me this object of itself, and then I can check for the ID, I can get the body it's associated with, and this is where the functionality really opens up. So I'm going to create another method in here called public void hit, and all I'm going to do is print out I've been hit, and before that I'm going to print out the ID. So you'll notice I pass an ID when I create this tutorial box object. So I'll use this in a little bit, but for now, let's create some of these tutorial boxes in our Box2D world here. So we're going to want a private tutorial box. How about we'll call this first one player, obj1, obj2. Okay, good to go. And let's see. So player equals new tutorial box. Has the world player. We'll just give them a 0, 0 coordinates, and then obj1 is new tutorial box world obj1, and we'll give this like 75, 70, 75. Obj2, same thing. And negative 75, 75. Okay, so this is essentially what we have right now. If I run it real quick, you'll notice it'll just be these 3 boxes in the middle of nowhere. I can't do anything, can't move, haven't really set anything specific. You know what, let me get some code out of another state real quick. Contact state, filter state. I believe the filter state has what I want. Oh no, I didn't use that at all. Light state definitely has it. So, okay, gonna get some of that code there. Dot body. Okay, and I can close that. Tutorial box. I'm going to set some linear damping to be 20. That way they don't just fly off into space when they've been hit. But yeah, again, you've probably seen me use this before. Very simple up, down, left, right controls with no gravity. So, what else? All right, so yeah, just to check that one more time, we're going to observe the player, or so to speak, player. Now I can move this, and I can hit these other objects and kind of push them around. Nothing really happens. You can see the friction applying on them a little bit. But yeah, so that's basic, very, very basic stuff. So time to actually utilize these IDs and understand what this set user data is doing. So remember, we also have this public void hit method. I want to use that in a little bit, but first things first, let's get a very, very basic begin contact method set up. And this is where things are going to be a little interesting at first, but a lot of the code is essentially the same thing over and over again. So for both begin and end contact. So to start, you'll notice you have this contact object, and what a contact contains is 2 fixtures, an A and a B fixture, and the fallacy to this is you have to do your own checking to see which fixture belongs to which type of body, and it could be either or. You don't necessarily know which body acted on the other fixture first. So this is where you're going to have to be a little smart with your logic, but I think what I'm about to present to you will be a pretty decent and formal way to get this going, so you don't have to write more code than you need to. So to start, let's get both of those fixtures out. So fixture fixture A, this is what I tend to use. Contact.get fixture A, pretty straightforward there. Fixture FB equals contact.get fixture B. Okay, now that we have that, we also need to make sure that they're not null. So if FA equals null or FB equals null, just return, nothing should happen there. And then if fa.get user data equals null, and the same for B equals null, also return. This is because when we're doing these checks, we want to make sure that we actually have something to be able to compare them against. And if we don't know what they are, because just having a simple fixture doesn't really tell us much about what we've found to collide. So it's good to just do both of these null checks just to keep yourself sane and not make the logic overly complex. So now we're starting to see some logic happening here, and let's just have a simple print statement. We'll just say a collision happened. Okay, and so now what we should get, and I definitely hope it occurs, but it definitely should, is when two objects collide and they aren't null and their user data isn't null, and thankfully in here we've set that the fixture that we created whenever we created these two bodies, or these bodies, we do set their user data to something other than a nullified type. And then we should be able to reach the system.out.println when they first touch. But when they end, nothing happens, so we're not going to get to that just yet. Okay. Now here's my player. So I'm going to move to the left and notice when I touch and watch down here what kind of happens. Oh gosh, okay, yeah, sorry, that is my bad. One line that we have to add in here. So you have to actually set the contact listener, and to do that, it's pretty straightforward. This dot world dot set contact listener, and you're just going to want to call new contact my contact listener, and it's as simple as that. So now you're essentially setting the determined outcomes of when fixtures touch each other when they collide and whatnot. So now we should be able to observe the print line. And there we go. So perfect. Collision happened. And remember, set your contact listener of your world to be able to use what we just set up there. So now you'll notice every time I keep hitting against this box, it'll keep saying that. Now, just like I said, there's some pretty similar code between begin and end contact. So we can just copy all that stuff. I know it's kind of bad practice to copy and paste code, but for the sake of the tutorial, of course. And let's have a different print statement to just kind of see what happens. It's always good to just check along the way and make sure things are working the way they should. So doing the same thing, checking A and B fixtures, checking if they're null in all circumstances, and then a collision stopped. So we're saying they aren't touching anymore. Let's go back in. So we have a collision happened, and we let go, so a collision stopped. Collision happened, stopped, perfect. So now we have a little bit more control of like what's going on in our world. We can observe when the collisions happen. So let's make things a little bit more interesting. So we don't really have to change anything in here in the rest of this video. It's all going to be kind of in here. So let's get some functionality out of this. So let's see. We're going to want to write some helper methods. I recommend doing that just because the code we're about to write is a little tedious to write, and it can really make your begin and end contact stuff get really messy. So I definitely recommend making this as modular as possible. So one thing you're going to, oh gosh, so it would be or private void, or no, boolean is tutorial contact, and then fixture A, fixture B. Okay, and return false. Okay, and so just because we're using the same kind of object, it's going to make this return case pretty easy to write. A dot get user data instance of tutorial box, and b dot get user data instance of tutorial box. Okay, now to explain this real quick, the reason I'm writing this method is so I can easily check what kind of fixtures I have. And you'll notice I use something called instance of, and you might have seen me use this in a previous video when I did some tiled map object parsing. Instance of just checks the kind of class type or data type that is returned here. It does like a check to see if the classes match. So because I have a class named tutorial box, and I have get user data, which returns a raw object, I can check if that object is a tutorial box. And in this case, because I set the fixture's user data to this, which is a class tutorial box, then this should evaluate to true, because I haven't created any other objects that aren't tutorial box objects for their user, or I haven't created any fixtures where the user data is something else other than a tutorial box. So this should return true. Do note this gets a little more complex when you're trying to compare different things, and I'll actually break that down real quick. So if a.get user data instance of tutorial box, or b.get user data instance of tutorial box, if a.get user data instance of play, oh, you know what, that actually isn't a very good way to do that now that I think about it, but you should kind of get the idea here. Get user data instance of player, turn true, otherwise return false. So in this case, you'll see that I check to see if A or B is a tutorial box, and then if either one of them is a tutorial box, I check if the second object, so it's essentially saying like, is one of these a tutorial box? Is the other one a player? And then I return true, otherwise return false. So that's how you can kind of check between two different types of user data types, or user data objects. Just kind of break it up like this, and you'll have a few of these methods that you can check and apply whatever action you want to happen between, like the response action between those. But I'm just going to get rid of that because all I need is this, just working with tutorial boxes. So back up here again, if is tutorial contact FA, FB, then we want stuff to happen. So I found two tutorial boxes have collided with each other, and I want them, or rather, I want one of them to print their hit method. So let's see. I'll do an explicit cast tutorial box. TBA equals fa.get user data, and I'm going to explicitly cast that to tutorial box. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing for B. TBB, and try to use better naming conventions, of course. Make your code readable, please. So TBA dot hit, and that means the fixture A is going to print its hit method. So let's go back here. You'll notice it'll print the ID and it'll say I've been hit. So let's try running that real quick now, and we'll be able to see how we can keep track of what's going on there. So in this case, I'm hoping it'll be player, but again, you can't really be too sure. Don't ever feel secure about knowing for a fact whether A is A and B is B, that kind of thing. So, okay, perfect. It looks like because the player's initiating the contact, I'm guessing that's why it's doing that, because it's implying the most force. But again, don't hold that as fact. So now you can see it's calling that hit method. And that's how you can get some functionality. So like if the player's been hit by a bullet, then if you remember that setup here, I check if one fixture is a bullet and one fixture is a player. Then in this case, I can have this as player and this as bullet, and the bullet could be removed or checked to be removed, and the player can take on damage. So like you'd call a hurt method or something in here, or you could subtract the HP. But essentially that's really all you can, or all I really want to show you here in this video. This is just very, very basic stuff, but the things I'd really like you to get from this is understanding like how these fixtures are separate, know to check whether or not they're null or not, and their user data, and then also make it modular. Do the fixture parsing outside of your begin contact and end contact, so you can just call these simple methods to check what fixtures are what fixtures and then handle the case there. Just like a big if statement switch case table here. And then when you're creating your objects, note that you want to set the user data of the fixture. That is important. You don't necessarily have to have this create box body code in here. Like I could still call body equals bodybuilder.create box world, what is that, x, y, 32, 32, false, false, I believe. And then I can get body dot get fixture list dot get 0 dot set user data. So you can do that really any way you want. Just note there's different ways you can go about it, so you don't have to keep all this body creation code in here unless you're building something very specific to just that object you're creating it in. And then setting the user data to the object that you're trying to correlate to, so you can be able to check if the user data is an instance of a particular object. And yeah, other than that, as you can see, you don't really need to do much in here, other than remembering to set the contact listener to your new contact listener. And of course, you can change that when you want. Doesn't really matter. For different levels or something that interact differently. But yeah, that should be everything to get you going on your way to get your contact listener all figured out and having some more interaction between your bodies. And I think I'm going to demonstrate the way to emulate a sensor, such as a button, that will achieve some kind of interaction with another body. So with that, I hope you enjoyed the video. Like, comment, subscribe as usual. And of course, in the info box below, I've started posting my Twitter account for any updates that I have going on, and I also have the GitHub, which I titled it kind of weird, and I wanted to change it, but I don't really mind. It's just YT-tut1. It's a GitHub repo, and you can check out all the source code there and everything, and just some of the stuff I've been messing around with. So you'll kind of notice some of the things I've got going on here or there. I'll be updating it and whatnot. Might not always be up to date. I have been pretty busy with school and whatnot. So with that, thank you for watching.